Hey y'all, my name is Gray Madden with Self Reliance Publishing, and today we're going to continue our series about how to raise worms. This video is going to be about worm bedding. I'm going to show y'all what I use personally, as well as cover some other options available to you. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so what I've got here in front of me is a tote of shredded damp cardboard and a tote of shredded newspaper. This is what I generally use for worm bedding most of the time. I take some cardboard and put it in a tote like this or in a bucket or something and fill it up with water and let it soak for a couple of days outside. And after a few days, I take the cardboard and shred it up into little pieces like this. You don't have to get too crazy with it, get it super small, but just so long as it's in little pieces, you're good to go. And I save my daily newspaper, and once I get a whole stack of it, I'll run it through the shredder. You should only use the non-glossy paper, and you should try and avoid pages that have a lot of color in them. It's going to be difficult to exclude color altogether, but if you've got a paper that's got a whole page of a picture, you might want to tear that one out. So what I do is I take this stamped cardboard and make a layer on the bottom of the tote. And I take the newspaper, throw some of that in there. The newspaper is dry, so I take a little squirt bottle and squirt some water on it to dampen it some. And I just alternate layers of cardboard and newspaper. I like to do about 50-50 on it. Doesn't have to be precise, but I've noticed that the worms tend to like the cardboard better than the newspaper. So if anything, I'd err on the side of adding more cardboard in there. Add a couple handfuls of newspaper. Squirt it down. And the rest of the cardboard. Just come in here and mix it up a little bit, best I can. And we're good to go. Now I generally try and get the bedding added into the bin a few days before I'm going to add worms to it and get the moisture content right. When you first mix it up like this, you're going to have a tendency to have some dry patches in there with that newspaper especially. But if you let it sit for a few days and monitor the moisture content, squirt it when needed, that newspaper will soak up some of the moisture from the cardboard and the wetter newspaper, and you won't have those dry patches for the worms to get stuck in. It's not really necessary with the newspaper and the cardboard, but that's the best practice. Now a lot of people like to use peat moss in their worm bedding, and if you do use peat moss, it's really important to have the moisture level correct for at least 48 hours ahead of time. The dry peat moss has a acidic pH, and so once you get it moist, it drops it down to a neutral level, and that's what you need for your worm bedding. So you want to have enough time for that process to occur so that your bedding's a nice livable home for your worms. Some other bedding that you can use is aged compost. If you've got a compost pile and you've got some that's not completely broken down but been there for a while, you can use some of that. Also, aged manure is a good bedding for worms, especially horse manure or droppings from rabbits and whatnot. That's great bedding. That's actually how I got started in raising worms. I had some pigs and I got interested in worms as a way of processing the pig waste. Now, hog waste isn't necessarily the best to use for worms, but you can use that as well if you age it long enough. One thing to keep an eye out for, though, if you're using manure, is to make sure that the animals that you're getting it from aren't on a dewormer, because that gets processed through the animal and comes out in their waste, so it will kill your worms. So make sure that if you have a source for manure, try and make sure that the animals aren't on any dewormers, because you want to avoid that at all costs. Some other things that you can use would be straw or hay. If you've got a source for wasted hay or wasted straw, you can use that for bedding. Pretty much anything that's got a lot of carbon in it that will absorb moisture and is not toxic and has a neutral pH. There's many things that will work for bedding. So I like to use what's available to me. I try and avoid peat moss personally. I understand that the way that it's harvested is not very sustainable and harms the environment. I'm not a tree hugger by any means, but I do believe that we should be a good steward of what God gave us and do our best to take care of it. So with that in mind, if there's any alternatives to peat moss, I definitely try and go that route. And this right here, the cardboard and the newspaper, is stuff that I have ready access to, and it's an excellent way of recycling it and seems to work just fine with the worms. So that's what I choose to use. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. I'll be making more videos covering other topics dealing with starting a worm farm and raising worms, as well as other topics dealing with self-reliance. I appreciate every like, every comment, and every subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.